Thanks for joining this session. My name is Jeff Barry. I am the Senior Director of Research and Development at LoyaltyOne. LoyaltyOne's a company that, on a global basis, operates a number of different loyalty programs. So we're in the loyalty game. That's what we do. We're part of a larger organization called Alliance Data, a Standard & Poor's 500 company some of you might be familiar with. In addition to my role as the head of research and development at LoyaltyOne, I'm also the research director at Colloquy. For those of you who don't know Colloquy, it's a free loyalty resource. It's the voice of, has acted as the voice of the loyalty industry for over 15 years now. It's a publication that we run that really tries to center in and around various trends that are going on in the loyalty space, everything from how are companies thinking about mobile integration to clearly things like gamification, as well as how do you manage the economics of a loyalty program. So if you are currently not a subscriber of Colloquy, I would encourage you to do so. Again, it's a free resource, certainly lots of ongoing information in there as it relates to loyalty. I assume since all of you are here, and I'll do this by way of a show of hands, are interested in the loyalty space. How many of you work for organizations that run loyalty programs today? Great, a whole host of you. And I assume the others, whether if you don't work for companies that run loyalty programs, you probably work for agencies that are involved in designing components of loyalty programs. So I think the things that I want to share with you today are really how we think about gamification and its integration into loyalty. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that I work for a company called LoyaltyOne, I actually hate the word loyalty. I think it's a bit of a dirty word for most organizations. I see a couple head nods. In particular, because for most organizations, it represents a significant cost. That's how most CFOs think about loyalty. And what I think as an industry, what we've generally lost sight of is loyalty is actually the outcome that we're after. It's not the tactic that we're actually employing. So I would encourage you as we go through this, and as you take insights from this conference back to your shop and think about how you implement some of the things that are talked about here today, how you're actually thinking about the journey towards customer loyalty, not loyalty as a specific tactic that sits within marketing. One of the things I thought would be important to do is talk to you just very briefly about how we think about gamification as it relates to loyalty. So certainly I'm no gamification expert, and I wouldn't pretend to stand up here and define it for you. For us as an organization, we think about gamification specifically as an engagement tool. We think about it as playing a role in the entire customer journey from awareness through to post-purchase and advocacy. And there's various tactics that you will employ along the way. If you think about anything that you're doing as it relates to marketing or a marketing context, it's really about how you change customer behavior, how you give them the information they need to have to make decisions, to buy from you, to experience other parts of your organization. Have any of you read Frederick Reichheld's work? Reichheld back in '93 wrote a book called The Loyalty Effect. He's often referred to as the high priest of loyalty. I didn't call him that, but that's one way he's often referred to. He's also the author of Net Promoter Score. So many of your organizations probably use Net Promoter Score to measure customer satisfaction. Although he is considered the high priest, I'll actually challenge some of what he talks about as it relates to loyalty. Generally in his work, he's thought about the path to loyalty as a very linear process. He really thinks about the point of first purchase and how that migrates then into repeat purchase, how you start to be able to upsell those customers, and ultimately how you build those folks to being advocates for your brand. Fundamentally, I think that's not how the world works today. I think there's various points along a consumer life cycle where there's opportunity to engage them, and certainly gamification is one way in which you would do that, but there are clearly many others. Part of why I wanted to talk about this is I think gamification has some risk associated with it today. In particular, if you think about over the last number of years, all of the different things that have happened in relation to marketing, and generally speaking, and you probably experienced this in your own organizations, and sadly, I'm revealing something about my age. I was working at this company when the internet wasn't around. So all of a sudden, we had opportunity to actually sell to people online and get them to engage in our various programs online. Well, we actually built an internet group, and we put that over here, and they were sort of the redheaded stepchild that we kept in the corner, and the rest of the marketing department didn't touch them. Then mobile became the biggest thing. So we built a group that focused on mobile, and what did they do? And we didn't think about them in relation to the rest of the marketing. And the risk in doing that is you really then don't think about how you're optimizing for the customer. You're thinking about how you're optimizing for the channel, and many of you will still work in organizations that are channel focused. But one of the things I really think is critical about gamification in its ability to actually engage is that it quickly become an integrated part of your marketing departments and an integrated part of how you think about consumer engagement, whether that is at the point of purchase or whether it's way up, in the awareness part of their consideration cycle. Important to think about how you're leveraging that tactic. So one of the things that I'm advocating for is that we don't allow gamification to become kind of this shiny ball, because clearly most organizations are thinking about it and spending a lot of time and energy around gamification, but haven't necessarily thought about how they're integrating that into their overall customer experience. A Forrester study back in 2011 suggested that 84% of companies had zero plan to do anything in relation to gaming or gaming mechanics. It wasn't on their radar. It wasn't something they were thinking about. I challenge you to think about an organization today that isn't doing something about it. There's no way in 3 years there are a whole host of gamification experts, so a lot of organizations are just bumbling their way through how they do things, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but certainly stands to potentially become the shiny ball, along with every other more equals better kind of thing. So I thought I'd reference some pop culture things. How many people watched the show Joey after the 10-year run of Friends, the spin-off show? Anybody? One person, two people. I thought I wouldn't get any, because nobody wants to admit that they ever watched Joey. Well, Joey lasted 2 years off the air, gone. Certainly flash in the pan. What about tanning solutions? Anybody use tanning solutions? Oh, I almost saw a hand there. No one will admit that. I'm pasty white, so I clearly do not. But clearly, tans have gone too far, and too much of a good thing is not necessarily better. It's how you think about a healthy-looking glow, not being orange in the case of our friends up here. Who are children of the 80s in the room? I think no one would disagree the 80s were the worst time in fashion ever, although some of the trends are actually coming back. Certainly, too much makeup, too big hair, both men and women, big suits and big disgusting clothing, all of which really was never good. Even at the time, I remember my mother actually looking quite a bit like the woman on the right here and thinking, even at that time, that's an awful look. You really shouldn't be thinking about that. So too much of a good thing is not always better. Certainly in the business environment, we see the same sorts of things. You see the use of QR codes kind of taking on a life of their own. So if you think about these, what value is a QR code that somebody's dragging behind an airplane? There's really nothing that anybody can actually do with that. There are actually blogs that are dedicated to inappropriate uses of QR codes, and people are having a laugh at the expense of the use of QR codes. I'll let this build itself out. Remember a time when everybody was using PowerPoint animation for business presentations? Certainly it wasn't really additive as it relates to the presentation. The fact that all these things fell onto the screen absolutely aren't adding anything to my ability to actually convey a message. And on top of that, if you look at what's in those bubbles, the overuse of business jargon is something we all experience. So too much of a good thing is not always better than not enough. We actually, on my team, play bullshit buzzword bingo, where everybody has their own unique card based on the bullshit words that they use, and whoever loses actually has to take the winner out to lunch. So there's something in punishment there if you don't want to go out with the person who called you out on all these things. Companies are certainly, great companies are certainly doing some terrible things also in relation to gamification. I love these companies, so this isn't a slam against any of these in particular, but these companies that we think of, we hold up as companies that know what they're doing in everything they do, have made some mistakes. Zappos built out gamification basically a virtual reality gamification piece, and what they failed to do with it, it was really intended to try and create a virtual shopping environment where you might see somebody wearing particular shoes and you would pick them. But one of the things that they failed to do was communicate that with their customers. So what value was that? They were awarding badges to customers for doing things. And they actually didn't really differentiate the experience much from their website, the way that folks generally, in research, the way that people generally are shopping online is a little bit more intuitive. They're looking for something in particular, and they love, the Amazon model is strong. They look for things that are like. They're not actually looking for, potentially a virtual world that they're shopping from. So Zappos' use of that failed, and they took it away. Google, no one ever can say anything bad about Google. You can say tons bad about them, but I actually like to be able to slam them a little bit. They built out something to actually get people to read on Google Plus, Google News, and they were awarding people badges for reading the number of articles that they actually read online. Now, the default setting was that the announcement of what you were reading was all private. So really, are people actually feeling rewarded by getting badges for the number of articles that they read? And then there was no competitive element to it because nobody else was seeing what you actually did. So Google kind of lost their way, I think, as it relates to how they actually deployed gamification in relation to some objective that they had. The two were not aligned. We talked a lot yesterday about making sure the design supports the objective that you're actually trying to achieve, and clearly that wasn't the right approach. And then Marriott built a Facebook game where they actually were trying to recruit potential hotel managers or executives. They built this out. They tried to get people to actually use it. They got 0 users. Nobody actually engaged with this app. It was all a game designed around hotel management. Now, I used to work in the hotel industry. Nobody really wants to work in the hotel industry. So really having people play that game is not particularly interesting. In addition, Marriott, who should know better than building out a game to recruit people for hotel management, when hotel management is a full discipline that you would go to school for and study for. So certainly, lining up the application for games and how, what objective you're actually after or what you're trying to achieve is critically important. And all 3 of these companies, although great companies, failed to think about that. And so just to further reinforce this idea of gamification as an integrated part of your strategy designed around ultimately what you're trying to achieve. So we think about gamification in general serving 3 particular constituents. So the way that our business is organized, we have our associates, we work with clients who are generally retail or financial companies, and they also in turn have customers. So we design and manage loyalty programs for those companies. Some of the ones that you might be familiar with, Air Miles in Canada, a program called DOTS in Brazil, big coalition programs. The Canadian program in particular has 70% of Canadian households actually enrolled and participating in the program. So big, well-recognized brand. So our associates need to be engaged. If the goal is how are we actually creating value for our clients through their customers buying more associated with a loyalty program, we need to have our associates engaged, we need our clients' associates engaged, and we need our customers or also who are their customers to actually be engaged in the program. So let me talk about 3 different things that we've been doing to try and achieve that. The first is associated with our associates. We've built out a recognition program. So part of what we've always struggled with is how do we actually make recognition fun? Usually recognition is work. People have to actually fill out forms and nominate people for awards. So we've tried to eliminate all of that within our 1,500 associates. We built a program called Pass It On, where we're leveraging a loyalty currency. So we know that our associates are also engaged in the programs that we operate. So we leverage that currency rather than go and build some other currency or some other reward system where every associate actually gets points that they can then use to acknowledge and recognize different associates. It's very easy. It's very intuitive. All you need to do is go on this particular app, identify the person, write a brief comment about them, and allocate points, or not. There's an option to not allocate points to them. And part of how we've decided to gamify that is by having leaderboards, both in terms of how frequently you are a recognizer, as well as how often you've been recognized. So it's created the competitive spirit among the associates around doing things that are outside of the scope of their job in order for others to want to think about recognizing them for some sort of achievement. What we found is 97% of our associates are actually actively participating. We've been running this program for over a year, where if we thought about typical recognition programs, they generally had, somewhere south of 25% participation rate. So we've achieved almost 100% participation rate. And interestingly enough, 40% of the recognitions actually come along with no points associated with them. So people have gotten themselves, we've now migrated from the extrinsic reward that everyone's been talking about to the idea that this is habit forming, and recognizing people feels good, and it doesn't always have to have some reward associated with it. So 40% of people are receiving recognitions that have no award. On the right-hand side is a program that we run for our associates called Move and Earn. So at the beginning of this year, we armed all of our associates with a Fitbit. And we now have a program where we're trying to get our associates to walk more. And what we found is we have over half of our associates actually participate. 59% are participating in the program, where the standard participation rate in these kinds of programs is generally about 30%. So we've doubled the participation rate. And what we've seen is not just are they participating, but they've actually increased the number of steps that they take on a daily basis by 27%. So tons of engagement. It's also now contributed to high associate engagement scores. So if you think about, again, the whole goal of anything you're doing in marketing and gamification is about how are you engaging people. 88% of our associates are now saying that they're proud to work for our company, not strictly on the basis of being awarded a Fitbit and earning points when they actually walk. The points are actually inconsequential. They get 1 point per day if they achieve their goal, which actually translates into virtually nothing. And the associates know what the value is. So it's interesting because the point actually is quickly not becoming the motivator. It's things like the leaderboard and the engagement that it actually represents. We also found just over 90% of our associates have said this type of a program demonstrates to them that the company actually cares about their health and well-being, that we're actually committed to doing something meaningful for them. Now, we're in Canada, so there's no altruistic lower your insurance premiums on the basis of this, different than in the US. So this is really just about, how are we actually helping our associates to achieve a healthier lifestyle. With our clients, so these would be like retail partners, one of the things that we do with them on an ongoing basis is help them build programs around their own associate engagement. So in any loyalty program, the only value is if you actually get people to identify themselves. So if you think about the benefit of your loyalty program is it's a very slick way to actually get a single aggregated view of your customer, which is part of why we generally advocate that everything you do across your organization, whether that's directly selling something or engaging your associates or finding ways to actually create new value or new products, leveraging your loyalty infrastructure is important across your organization because you need to actually be able to tie all of the data that's being generated, which is frankly the biggest benefit of your loyalty program, down to individual people in order to be able to action that and create personalization for those individuals. So we work with our clients on programs that will award their associates for asking for the card more frequently. So if I'm a frontline cashier and I'm not asking people if they're part of the program, I'm just generally losing access to the information about that customer. Yes, there's a cost associated with the points I give them, but the cost should be offset by the opportunity to actually ultimately engage that consumer in unique and interesting ways. So we work with those companies on building programs around that, and so each individual retailer will have leaderboards on how many times the card has actually been swiped, what sort of volume of data is being generated, what kind of sales are actually going through on the card. So really important, and that each of the partners think about how they actually get value out of it. And then lastly, the our customers piece is really, we do a couple different things there. That's our customers and their customers, centered in and around both easy short-term promotion. So on the left-hand side, this is all about buy something and get a little sticky figurine. We do this mostly in Europe, but this is all about short-term wins, and it gets people to actually have something tangible and think about the fact that they want to get the next one, so they come back in and purchase. And on the right-hand side, this is a mobile app. We build competitions here centered in around having people check in when they visit a retailer, and there's no benefit to it other than there's a leaderboard that actually tracks how many times you've actually checked in, and ultimately the winner will get a certain point allocation. So fundamentally, when you think about gamification and you think about it in relation to your loyalty strategy, I'm advocating for think about how you use the mechanics of your loyalty program to create games along the way. Rather than a separate standalone item that sits off in the corner, it's really important to think about how you're actually using it to be both a data generator as well as a consumer engagement tool. But fundamentally, for many of us, we start to think about gamification as the entire pie. It's all we're trying to do. It's where we're trying to go, and it's replacing some of the things, some of the tried and true marketing tactics. So I'd encourage you to think about it strictly as one slice of your pie, not ultimately the only pie, because you'll end up looking like this girl in a pie eating contest if all you're thinking about is gamification as the sole strategy for consumer engagement. So I hope that was helpful in terms of some ideas for you. I will end there. I'm certainly happy to stick around off to the side if anyone has questions or wants to talk. Thank you.